Welcome to another episode of Supernova Lab District 6 Technologies Mastery Series, where we have conversations with industry game changers in the Caribbean and in the diaspora. I'm Jonathan Sylvester, co-founder of District 6 Technologies, along with my business partner, Javon Robinson. We'll lead you through a series of discussions and give you insights to critical topics impacting Barbados and the wider Caribbean. In line with Supernova Lab's ARC Academy's mission, this six-part series is designed to equip innovators, researchers, and emerging founders with access to insights from our region's best minds to build mission-driven experiments. Today, my esteemed colleague Javon will be discussing System Leaders Are Made, Not Born, Cultivating the Next Public Innovators with David Silcott. David is a FinTech entrepreneur and systems innovator working at the intersection of technology, finance, and public sector transformation. Through his work at Serra, a FinTech payment platform, David supports the design and deployment of scalable digital systems with a focus on leadership, execution, and institutional readiness. If you're a public sector leader, a regulator, a CIO, a CTO, technology manager, policy analyst, or a civic technologist, this is a critical episode to tune into. That being said, spread the word, like and subscribe to the series, and join our community. Over to you, Javon.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, and welcome, David, to the Master Series podcast. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. Glad to be here.
All right, good to have you here, man. Listen, David and I go way back from
Way back.
teenage years, way back. Not dating
But
ourselves.
before
Way
you
back.
and I, Javon, I don't know whether to feel hurt or
Yes. From
Yes.
back in the day, so to speak. So it's really good, David, to have you here on the Mastery Series podcast and just having a chat. Really, system leaders are made, not born. Yourself, you've been involved in the tech space, in the fintech space, particularly. You, along with your business partners, you've developed something really innovative by the way of a payment gateway. Something that we're still pioneering, if you want to call it that, within the Caribbean region. So we want to have a chat with you today about that, its wider implications for the Caribbean, the journey about that. So the fintech application we're talking about is Serra, and I hope we're pronouncing it correct. Serra? Yep, got
Sarah,
it
yeah,
correct. Serra.
Sarah.
Yes, there you go. So let's start with that. Tell us about the journey. What led to the development of Serra?
Hmm. Yes, so I've always been interested in solving problems with technology and looking for ways to make everyday things simpler and more efficient.
Yeah.
So, if you go back to like mid 2010s, while working in the UK fintech sector, I began exploring a couple of possible ventures within the Caribbean.
Okay.
But one thing kept coming in the way. Like there wasn't a simple and easy way to collect payments digitally from most residents. Everyone had a card, but well, not everyone had a card, so that's where the problem came up. So we decided to kind of wait. But each time I visited Montserrat, the contrast became clearer. In the UK, digital payments had already become part of everyday life. You pay your bills, you send money, you're running a business. And here back home, most transactions still relied heavily on physical cash. And that in itself creates friction for most individuals and businesses. So for a while, we assumed that the infrastructure would eventually appear. So kind of sit back and wait, right? But after a few years, it became clear that nothing is happening. Okay, so what we decided to do, well, we had said, let's have a go at this. Let's try and build it ourselves. In our day-to-day jobs, we actually write software. So why not do it for ourselves? So Sarah then started with a fairly simple idea: build a trusted mobile-first platform that makes everyday digital payments practical in a small island economy.
Yeah.
And because we are from Montserrat, we felt we had a better chance of designing something that fits the local culture rather than trying to import a model from somewhere else, which is very common. You just import something from the UK or the US. So we decided, let's try and build this thing from the ground up, taking into account, your local culture, etc. And yeah, there's Serra. The name actually came a few weeks later. We were trying to, well, if I may, we were trying to come up with a name that would actually best suit us.
Right,
So
right.
I don't know if you noticed the name. Well, a lot of people assume Serra came
Uh-huh.
about because it's part of Montserrat, but that's not the case.
Uh-huh.
We were actually, because we have a Caribbean-wide vision, we are looking for something that would actually unite us. So we went through all kinds of things. We looked at our dialect, we looked at everything, and then we came up on the like a vocabulary list for the native Arawaks.
Okay.
And in there, there's a word Serra, which means to barter, exchange, or trade. I'm like, yes, that's it. So that's
Fantastic.
how we came up with it. It was only 2 weeks later, one of the co-founders called me and said, "Boy, look here." And then he showed me that Serra is actually part of Montserrat. I'm like, okay. So that's how we came about.
That's, you
Mm,
know what, that's
mm,
interesting because all the
yeah.
time, you and I have spoken about Sarah and what you and the team have been doing. We've never really actually had this conversation about where the name, and I will be honest with you, I assumed it was just part of the Montserrat,
Yeah.
incarnation that was brought into it. So it's very good. So
Yes.
Sarah, you said, came from the Arawak to barter to trade, essentially.
To yeah, yeah, to exchange, barter, or trade. Yeah. Yeah.
That is
And that's
brilliant.
exactly the problem that we're trying to solve. So
That is brilliant. What's really wonderful about, as you explained there, David, in terms of how Serra came about and looking to solve problems and innovators, basically, is what we're having the conversation here about today. And in with you and the team building out Serra, so to speak, you've had to basically design a system to scale. And we're talking about the Caribbean, we're talking about smaller economies. We're not in North America or Europe where you have huge economies, etc., etc. Tell us about that experience, David, about bringing the operation forward from concept to reality, thinking about the execution of building it and bringing it into the actual open marketplace.
yeah, so with that, when we came up with the idea, well, again, these are things that we've done in the UK, for example. Two of the other co-founders are actually UK based.
Okay.
So naturally, we'll try and take the same approach to building that software. Okay, those are learnings we've acquired over the years in the UK. So building something and scaling. So that aspect is fine. But what became very apparent, especially here in the Caribbean, is that you have to take local behaviors into consideration, like how businesses or the institutions operate. Okay. I'm going to admit, we were quite naive starting this. We built something from technology wise. Yeah, you can build something that would scale, get more users. It will naturally handle them and grow. But scaling on the other side of the fence, we're dealing with the human beings or existing institutions. That's where the challenge lies. So the hardest part wasn't technology. The hardest part was actually dealing with the existing institutions and dealing with the existing people. You build it. We went out there with Serra first, say, hey, look at this. Just tumbleweeds and crickets, right? So, because everyone is actually looking at you with some kind of skepticism, right? Everyone
Yeah,
is
yep,
used to
yep,
actually, um,
yep.
people on the end users are used to using cash. So you have to
Yes.
go in trying to convince them that this is going to help them to bring in more money, and it's not going to just be a way for the government to actually monitor what they're doing. And equally on the business side of things, sometimes we're seen as a threat. Okay, so you have to go in there and um, show them that, listen, we're not here to actually change
Hmm.
or replace you, but we're here to complement the existing financial systems. Yeah, what we're looking for is a way to give people a better, let's say, a better way of life. They could actually spend their money a lot easier. They could actually, as innovators or people who are actually entrepreneurs, they could
Yeah.
actually go start offering their services online. And in that way, we have to show them that, listen, what we're doing here can actually bring value to you as a business, as an existing bank or financial institution, because there'll be more money flowing. You'll both of us would actually make something from it, and equally your customers will be a lot more satisfied. You understand? They're not limited to just coming into the bank and standing up in a line to waiting for cash, etc.
Archaic way of doing things, yeah.
Yeah. So I hope I've answered that question. If I haven't, just
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
Because sorry, go ahead if you want to add. Go ahead, David.
No. I said just ask, just keep on asking. Sorry, I'm done there.
No problems, no problems. It's one of the interesting things because you look at Serra, and what I want to ask you here, because folks listening to this broadcast and be wondering, like, okay, first time we're hearing about Serra, they may have heard of, for instance, Dcash, something that was operationalized, I think, by the central bank. Could you differentiate for listeners the difference between Dcash and Serra, if there are similarities even between them, and if there are any differentiations?
When we started the Serra journey, we started looking at doing our research, looking at what's already in existence within the region, and we naturally found the central bank's plan for Dcash, and because both were born out of the same problem, there are lots of similarities. So naturally, we reached out to them. Okay, so Dcash, it's about digitizing the Eastern Caribbean dollar. It's a central bank digital currency. So it's issued, managed by the central bank. But as part of the Dcash program, they also developed an app, the Dcash app. So the Dcash app itself will be very much similar to Serra. But the only difference there is Dcash was all about showing people, it's about demonstrating that, listen, you can actually use this digital wallet, albeit backed by CDBC. Serra is not. What we do, we tokenize. We just have a digital representation of the EC dollar. In our case, we have to hold the EC in a bank account, whereas with Dcash, the token is the actual currency. Okay. Yeah. So the idea there, I think, if I remember correctly, the central bank's plan was to go and digitize about, I don't know if it was around 60%. We have to check that, of the printing, the money printing.
Right.
So because printing currency is actually quite expensive. There's a lot of security concerns, etc. So it's a lot easier. So we were for that, and as a team, we're always thinking outside of the box. So we say, okay, if Dcash becomes a success, we can leverage that platform. So we were quite keen on seeing Dcash succeed, because there was a lot of alignment between with what Dcash is doing and what Serra is doing.
Okay.
So yeah, so I think so. Dcash has this big platform, and then sitting on top of that, you'll have the financial institutions. You have the Dcash app, and you have non-banking institutions such as Serra, who also sit on top of that. That was the actual plan.
Excellent. I know Jono probably is itching to get in because he's had experience dealing with digital payments. I know he traveled to Africa, to Kenya, and had that experience from a cash-based system. So, matter of fact, I'll let him talk about that.
Fantastic. I mean, it was the most amazing thing. Went to Kenya probably about 7 or 8 years ago on a conference. And as most conferences go, you have a couple of days afterwards to go and do your tours and pick up a few souvenirs. So I was taken to one of the souvenir spots where everything is sort of laid out and you have all of the local vendors. And I'm walking through and I have a wad of cash on me. And I go to one of the vendors and I'm trying to buy something for my wife, and they look at me and my cash, and they're just like,
where are you going with that?
Right? Don't you have M-Pesa? I'm just like, M-Pesa? No, I'm not from here, and they're just like, and they wouldn't accept my cash. They would not take the cash. And
Imagine
I had to go to another guy who would take it and then transfer the cash from his phone to the other vent. It was a whole thing. And that was just the experience all the way through. So, when you said that the culture and getting the people to adopt the technology, why do you think in the context of Kenya it was easier for them to adopt it with millions of people versus in Montserrat or in Barbados? Because we've had a similar problem here in Barbados.
And money.
Had M Money, so you're familiar with M Money.
Okay,
I
okay.
was working with the guys at Bit to
Mm.
roll out M Money, and they had a similar problem of adoption. Why in the Caribbean are we so tied to our cash?
Um, I'm gonna try and answer this, and I'm hoping that my co-founder does not kill me for this. He's okay. So one of my co-founders is actually Kenyan.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I was in Kenya a few years ago for his wedding, and I experienced the whole M-Pesa. Um, well, see, I saw people using M-Pesa. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
why not the Caribbean? Okay,
Right. Yep. Yep.
why not the Caribbean?
Yeah.
So I think there are two reasons why. I think there are two reasons why it's a bit more difficult here in the Caribbean. Okay, and this is just my personal point of view.
For sure.
Within Kenya, um, it's just one state. It's one country. Okay,
Okay. Yeah.
within the Caribbean, small island developing states, these are challenges that we as small countries face. Okay. Um, well, I guess if you're looking at Barbados in isolation, it will be no different to what Kenya experienced because if I recall correctly from what my co-founder Charles told me, initially they had these challenges. Okay,
Right.
it take a couple of years before it actually, started picking up. Okay, so we must. It doesn't go from zero to hero one all of a sudden or overnight. Okay, there are learnings you have to try and adopt. You have to understand the people. That's the challenge. Understand people, and if you have government backing, that's actually quite critical. If you have the systems in place, if you have the institutions or the guidelines which would actually help people say, okay, these are the rails that you have to operate within, it makes it a lot easier. So I think what we find here in the region, and it's changing, is that these public institutions, they take the time putting the support behind efforts such as these, and 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 sometimes we have this distrust of banks and the government and things like that. So there's an education piece, and there's an education piece. Education does not only apply to the individual, because that's what we noticed with Serra. You have to go out there, talk to the individuals, but you also have to go and educate the institutions. I don't mean that in a bad way, just but you say, listen, this is going to benefit all parties.
Yeah.
So, just to summarize the answer to your question, I think it's a combination of the small island developing states, and it's just because we're seeing M-Pesa some years on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think that we might say, okay, we want to get there right away, but it takes time, and we have to. Well, the fintechs like Serra have to be determined. They have to look. They have to always reflect and say, okay, what did we do wrong, or what can we improve? What's the feedback coming back from the end users, and then use that to say, okay, let's go again, let's try another approach.
I have a follow-up question for you, David, with regard to the Kenya experience both you and Jono are talking about here on our conversation. And I know it's always good to create our own, but what I want to ask you, you went to Kenya, you saw the M-Pesa, you're an innovator, you're a programmer, you're a coder, et cetera, but even more so, what was it that inspired you, or well, maybe I should use a different word. What led to that decision to, instead of going to the creators of M-Pesa in Kenya, said, hey, you know what, I am from the Caribbean, we have nothing like this there. Let us see how we could get your system over to the Caribbean, et cetera, but instead you and your team came together and decided to create something instead, and we have Serra. What made you make that decision, if you want to call it that? I'm intrigued to know.
Yeah, fair question. There's always this build versus buy stage that we go through. And although there's similarities in terms of, there's somewhat similarities, we have Kenya and here in the Caribbean. Culturally, there's still differences. And I think with Kenya, you had to started with the mobile company. So I cannot remember the name of the mobile company. Again, my co-founder, Safaricom. Okay, yes,
Yeah.
yeah, right. So for that system to work here, you had to have well, we had to take on board like Digicel or Flow because you have to have a mobile company. They're using that platform to actually send money across. Whereas with well, in Serra's case, for example, um, regulation has evolved, um, and what we noticed, we are going to be scrutinized. There's this perception that we are more susceptible to, say, money laundering, etc., in the Caribbean, right?
Okay.
Some years back with all of these banks pulling out to reduce their risk, etc. So a new company coming in has to make sure, and this is where the whole systems thinking came in. There's the technology, but there's regulation. Okay, we have to know who this person is, where they're coming from, etc. And for Serra, we made that call simply because the smartphone, well, like in Kenya, almost everyone had a phone,
Yeah,
but in the
right.
Caribbean, almost everybody have 2 point something smartphones. Yeah. So the research that we did there showed that listen, everyone has a smartphone.
Yeah.
And we realized that we needed a smartphone to actually implement some of the functionality in terms of the due diligence that we needed to do on users.
Okay.
So leveraging when you look at those things, you're like, okay, slight there's some cultural differences there. We might be scrutinized a bit more, right? It might make a bit more sense to actually build what we have, and we can get it up fast. We already have an idea what we're going to build, so that's
Yeah.
the best way forward. Otherwise, we would have had to pull in a third party, say the telephone companies, etc.
Got
And
you.
it's a tougher sell. Maybe, who knows? Maybe in a year, maybe in a few years, it can
Yes.
evolve, and we can say, listen, what we've built may not be fit for purpose. We can switch over to another platform. You understand? We've already have adoption. Um, how the platform has been used actually now requires something different. And we have to do that assessment. Do we build it or do we um, buy or partner with someone else?
Understood. Understood. You know, the interesting thing, David, is that, sometimes, people talk about leadership in innovation, and normally they focus on personalities or visionaries. Internationally, we hear about the Elon Musk, the Bezos, all these guys, and it's about the personality around Musk and what is he coming up with next. Yourself, from a systems perspective, David, what do you
Mhm.
think actually matters more than the charisma of the innovator?
Hmm. Charisma. I don't know if I have charisma,
Of course
but
not.
but I think that charisma. I must say, charisma is very important,
Uh-huh.
especially and this is just again, this is based on our experience. You come um, in order to get adoption. As I mentioned before, I spoke about skepticism. In order
Yes.
to get past that initial barrier, the initial hurdle, you
Yes.
have to have that. You have to interact with that person. You have to sell them, right?
Hmm.
And I think that what what we are seeing there, what we had to do was, well, that would actually get people get their guard down. They'll get them to download the app, for example.
Yes.
But the most important things now is actually the operational aspect of it. Can the platform do what it says on the tin?
Uh-huh.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
does it meet the regulatory requirements which are out there? Okay, because naturally, um, it's one thing to actually say install an app. Now people say, okay, we have 5,000 downloads, right? But are these people returning? Are they actually using the platform?
Got you.
Okay,
Got you.
so now beyond that, okay, after you've managed to convince them, you get them smiling, they actually join the platform, they install your app. Now, does this app or this platform meet their day-to-day needs, fulfill their day-to-day needs? Okay, and this is where the it's actually up to us the people pushing out the solution to make sure that, one, you're actually meeting those regulatory requirements because you don't want to be shut down. Two, the day-to-day usage that someone actually goes out there, sending money to friends and family, for example, topping up their phones, all of those things. Does that actually, is the user happy with using that? Is like when they wake up in the morning, what's the first thing they do? Do they go and top up their phone? When you start looking at your data and you see they're actually doing all of those things, then you know that you've actually met it. And the last bit is about the availability of the system. Is the system capable of operating like as expected 24/7? Well, not exactly 24/7, but up most of the time, because as a payment platform, this is what people would expect of you. They want to have access to their money every time they log in. So that bit is actually more that's more important in a sense than charisma. But you cannot really push aside charisma, especially for for people who are starting up on your company, because you need to get into the door. You need someone to start using it. They have to trust you.
Yes.
So somehow you have to woo them in.
Yeah, very important, very, very important.
Yeah.
One of the things you spoke about there, Dave, was regulation. You mentioned regulation as you spoke there just now, and particularly, fintech, if we want to call it that, is still I would say, newly developing tech concept within the Caribbean. Someone such as yourself and your business partners, many of them I'm familiar with. You guys work within what we would say the intersection of a fintech, institutional systems, particularly. When bringing fintech systems such as Serra on board, and from a regulatory standpoint, how difficult was it for you? What were some of the, if you don't mind, without giving away too much, some of the hurdles you had to go through, and in terms of particularly convincing those at the higher levels in the institutional decision-making capacity that this new innovative concept will definitely bring change to the Caribbean, how we do business even in the Caribbean?
Yes. Well, for us, our first year or year now, before we actually went live, we spent almost a year trying to understand what is or what will be required of us. Working within the Caribbean, well, back then there wasn't much to go on, whereas in the UK you had the regulator, and they said, listen, these are the boxes you need to check. You come here, you're within Montserrat and the wider region, you don't have those check boxes.
Yeah.
So you start asking questions. So that led to our conversations with the central bank, etc. So we had a lot of conversation with the central bank or local regulator, and they were quite helpful. And at times, they admitted, listen, we don't have anything in place, but what we can do is regulate you under existing regulations.
Okay.
And that it wasn't perfect, or it's not perfect, but at least it gets us out there to actually demonstrate what we're capable of. So the thing is, with financial institutions, with financial systems, the technology interacts with the institutions, regulation, culture, and everyday behavior. It's like It's just everything coming together at once, right? And we found ourselves juggling so many different balls at the same time. Just to understand, like, okay, where do we go first? Well, of course, we have to make sure the regulator was a big part of it. So regulation was a big part of it. So we had to build our system around that. Initially, we went in thinking that, okay, it's just about moving money. But then we quickly realized, no. Most of what we've developed was around the software that we've developed is around regulation. Okay?
Yeah.
And then once we start pushing out there, when we go to the institutions, and I must admit, we went to a couple of places, and they weren't sold on it.
Okay.
They weren't sold on it.
These are government institutions. These are public institutions or private entities.
It's a mix of both.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a mix of both.
So that's. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it's a mix of both. But again, I alluded to it back, some minutes ago, where that didn't really deter us. we knew that we had to sell ourselves. We knew we had to prove ourselves, and maybe it was just always said it's a bit too early for this. So we go back, we get somebody on board, we get the numbers, we show that listen, after a year we're still here, after 2 years we're still here, 3 years we're still here, 4 years in, and there are things that we cannot talk about, but what we've seen, we have the numbers internally to show that year on year we're going in the right direction.
Gotcha.
So that gave us the the determination to go out there and approach those institutions or the businesses a few years later. I'm saying this is what we've been doing.
You know, it's very good, Dave, that you had what I would call the stickability. You know what I'm saying? To really push through, you and your team, in light of going to some of the public sector, private sector organizations, and as you said, they weren't sold on what you guys were doing. And that is the thing that you find, David, that you have so many well-intentioned innovative initiatives, so to speak, within the private sector, but they struggle to gain traction with the traditional businesses. I think we call them John O brick and mortar established institutions. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So why do you think that is? And especially, in a Caribbean, small island developing context, Dave, why do you think that is?
Yeah, well, in many cases, it comes down to incentives and risk tolerance, right? Established institutions, especially in sectors like finance, they are designed to prioritize stability, compliance, and long-term trust, right?
Okay.
And the systems and decision-making process kind of reflect that responsibility. Startups, on the other hand, we are designed to experiment more quickly. So when those two worlds interact, the pace and expectations can be quite different.
Got you.
Okay, so yeah, one thing our experience with Serra has shown us is that we just have to build trust with end users, and we also have to build that trust with the institutions. Yeah, so and as I mentioned before, the new platforms, they can be sometimes perceived as a threat, but we found that over time, when you demonstrate that collaboration is mutually beneficial, so that better customer experience can lead to more innovation and ultimately more business, then the institutions tend to become more open to working together. So it's all about selling yourself. It's about selling that story. Yeah. So it's important to know that from the beginning, our goal has never been to replace the existing institutions. So some might think that our goal is never to do that, but it's more to complement them and to add more value for the customers they already serve. So in financial systems, especially, innovation tends to succeed when new solutions strengthen the broader ecosystem rather than try to disrupt it entirely. So that's what we're trying to do, and it's about selling that story. So sometimes they come, you're going, their guards are up, but it's about that's where charisma comes in.
Yes.
Yeah. Just get past that, and then you're able to sit down and have that conversation.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And you speak about trust, and trust is such a vital thing, especially when dealing with, financial service. Let's say the financial services industry. Trust is a huge thing, but in building trust, and especially within, we're talking about Caribbean development here, in terms of what you guys are doing, but also to the wider focus of our conversation today. What role do you think, Dave, public involvement via government policies, programs, if you may call it that, what role does this play in bringing vital innovations such as what you and your team are doing with Serra on board, and taking them from not just concept to implementation, but more so to acceptance?
Yes. So public institutions, they play a very important role because they help shape the environment in which innovation takes place. In the finance sector, they don't operate in isolation. They have to exist within the regulatory frameworks. That's what I keep on mentioning. The payment infrastructure and the systems that governments help oversee. Yeah. So I think one of the most valuable things that public institutions can provide is clarity.
Okay.
You understand? that we lost a lot of time on that. Okay, and so when innovators understand the rules of the system and how new ideas can fit within it, they can design solutions that align with those expectations rather than working against them.
Okay.
So yeah, it's that clarity that we are looking for. And so now the governments, they can actually help by supporting infrastructure that makes innovation possible. So things like the payment rails, identity systems,
Yeah.
policies that encourage responsible experimentation. So just as an example, the payment rails. So the ECCB, they kind of pause Dcash 2.0, but they've taken a step back to more or less focus on those rails, like moving money from one island to another, for example.
Okay.
I can't remember the term right off the top of my head, but it's those things that actually help innovators like Serra and the M-Monies, etc., to actually innovate and build systems that users would actually enjoy. Okay, so
Ex-
in our experience, Sarah, progress tends to happen when the public institutions and the innovators see themselves as part of the same ecosystem. So when that collaboration exists, it
Yeah.
becomes much more easier for new ideas to move from that concept to practical implementation.
Yeah. Understood. Jono, I don't know if you're having any thoughts around the really
Yeah, for
lovely
sure.
conversation. Yeah.
I
Sure.
Mhm.
mean, I heard you make mention to the innovators interacting with, the established institutions. What sort of I want to focus in on the innovators, the young people coming out of university, the ones who are, in their sort of their 20s, and they are working on new innovative solutions, and they're trying to figure out, all right, how do I get this to scale? How do I get my idea to scale? What do you think outside of charisma? what are some of the skills that are going to be critical for them to become the next generation of leaders, navigating, the technology-driven transformation that we're currently going through? Because I kind of feel like we're facilitating, the work you're doing at Serra, the work we're doing in D6,
Mhm.
what Supernova Lab is doing. We're sort of creating that environment, or helping to create that environment. But
Yeah.
what's the mindset that the younger generation need to come in with in order to take it to the next level?
Yeah, so I would say first, well, we're in a world where technology, for example, changes like
Rapid.
in the blink of an eye.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, um, and they're quite powerful tools out there. And I think these those coming up are they're in a good space. They could actually build something quickly. But what I realize now is even more important. It was very necessary for Sarah to succeed. I'm saying, well, yeah, we will succeed.
Of
We're
course.
still early. Yeah, yeah. So, for us
Speak
to
it
get,
so.
yeah, so for us to get to where we are right now, this spirit of collaboration, knowing
Yeah.
that, um, you don't know everything, just accepting that you
Yes.
don't know everything. So for example, within Sarah, we have someone who's specializes in money laundering, anti-money laundering, compliance, data science, um, you know, software testing. They're people risk, so they're people that we can lean on to actually help, um, like guide us in the right direction. So those who are becoming new leaders, um, system leaders, they have to realize that, listen, it's not just about any one aspect of the system. There are multiple faces to it. And in order to that, a team or getting that information from those, well, could be someone close to you or someone who decides to team up with you to take that up, would actually be the one ingredient that helps you succeed as a company, or helps your endeavor to succeed. So I think,
Okay.
I don't know if I answered your question there, but I think
No,
that's
you
actually
did.
quite critical.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's the idea that yeah, you can't do it all yourself.
Yeah,
Have a good, clear understanding of what you can do, and work with others to deliver a result. Um, but when we're working across sort of multiple fields, finance, technology, policy, operations, and when you're trying to shape, um, you know, become a tech leader, because a lot of the younger generation, they're going to be looking up, and they're seeing the Elon Musks, and they're seeing,
yeah,
guys like you and guys like us, and they're thinking, all right, these guys are at the forefront of what they're doing. Um, you know, what what do, what kind of advice would you kind of give them, to say these are a couple of the steps that you need to take, um, in order to get from where you are today to where you need to be and beyond.
um, so what I guess what I would say, well, me personally, as I try to be, I make myself available to those coming up to say, listen, I try to give as much advice as possible. So if you
Yeah.
see someone out there, someone that you have access to,
Yeah.
you sit down, you listen, you talk to them, okay? Because and I think it's from those experiences. For me personally, I did systems thinking. I didn't know what that meant,
Okay.
right? When I looked it up, I realized, but wait, that's how I'm already thinking. I always look at the big picture, how all these different components fit together. Um, being a software, well, I was once a software architect. I had to think that way. So naturally, I just found a term that actually fits fits what I'm already doing. When we were looking at Serra, we naturally start thinking that way. So
Right.
what I would advise those to do is actually find someone they can actually talk to,
Hmm.
all right, and listen, because experience, in my view, is the best teacher. If you're going to build something, if you have the educational institutions, it's one thing to actually go and learn programming. It's another to actually build a real world system that actually have to take into consideration the regulatory aspects, how users feel about your product, etc. Putting all
Right.
those things together, and I can assure you that the assumptions that you go into that space with a year, 2 years in,
Yeah.
it's going to be totally different. You're
Yeah.
going to approach it totally different, and it's something I'm glad we had that experience. Now we're looking at different things that we're going to be bringing into Serra, for example, and we're taking those learnings and
Hmm.
applying them because we had
Yeah.
this big backlog of things that we say these are things that we'd like to bring in based on our experiences. But now
Right.
we have to now complement that with how people react to new features, to new technology coming in.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, I back to your point, Jonah, it's about making sure that I would advise them, take a real world problem
Yeah.
and jump
Right.
at it. You're already skilled in one aspect, and leverage your a team or your partners or anything like that to actually put it together.
Hmm.
And always take a step back and look at the big picture.
Right.
Yeah, don't if you go and look at it in isolation, it's especially in today's world, it's likely to fail.
Yeah.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Right. I feel you on that. I think one of the things that certainly helped, Javon and I when we were, creating D6, um, was the breadth of our experience in different fields, but having the same vision and the same goal. Um, what I've advised young people to do is don't just stick, if you're in the computer science department at university, go and sit with the accountants, go and sit with the guys in economics, go
Yeah.
and hang out with somebody you know um, in a different field, in the
Marketing.
med
Yeah.
school,
Management.
right?
Yeah.
In med school, because there are problems that they're going to have that you might have a solution to,
Yeah.
and vice versa.
Yeah.
And with that collaboration, because we're talking health tech, we're talking agri-tech, we're talking, all of the fields are starting to blend together
Yeah.
under the umbrella of tech. But if you stay in your silo of, the problem is the code or this line of code, or, I can't get my, I
Yes,
can't
yes.
get my
No,
code to work.
yeah, no, but you're so right. I think okay, like even hiring, what I tend to, even within, if you look at if you're being myopic, I look at just tech alone.
Hmm.
Even within tech, there's so many different areas that you have the back end or the front end, etc.
Right,
What we're looking for is someone who's what we call T-shaped. Okay,
Mhm.
right,
so you're specializing in one area, but you actually have some understanding of a broad
right,
area. So
right,
to actually to actually add a bit more to that, I think one of the most important capabilities is technical literacy. No,
right,
leaders do not necessarily need to be engineers themselves, but then
right,
they do need a working understanding of how technology systems operate and how these systems can affect the organizations they lead. Yeah,
right,
so and that understanding helps them to make better decisions about innovation and risk. So
sure.
I'm not saying that you have to be a programmer per se, but understanding it. One of
Hmm.
the other capabilities, what I would say, is the ability to work across disciplines, as you just mentioned, right? So, because many of the challenges we see today, they sit at the intersection of like technology, regulation, operations, customer behavior.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so institutions that encourage collaboration across the areas tend to develop leaders who can think more holistically about
right,
complex problems. So
yeah,
that's what you want, that big picture thinking. And then another one is creating environments where responsible experimentation is possible. So innovation tends to require testing ideas, learning from outcomes, and gradually refining the solutions. And institutions, I'm gonna tie this back into something else.
yeah,
Institutions that um, allow the space for that kind of learning process tend to produce leaders who are better equipped to navigating change. Now, this is one of the reasons I think we in the Caribbean we haven't seen much change because, as I mentioned before, some of these institutions they're stuck in the way this is how we do things, and they're gonna keep on doing it that way. There's
right,
no space for experimentation at all, right? And in our experience, with Serra, the most effective progress often happens when technical understanding, institutional knowledge, and practical experimentation come together. Okay,
right.
so
Fantastic.
this, I guess, if I'm going to say something to the institutions in the Caribbean, it's about they tend to be a bit more open. I know for a fact that some of the financial institutions they don't do things because they're looking at they say this is what the regulation says.
Right,
But luckily, I have someone in my team. They say, listen, the 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 guidelines are there. They don't say you have to do it exactly this way. You
right,
understand? You
right,
can actually operate within those guidelines. You can
yeah,
find innovative ways to operate within those and give your customers a good experience. You don't have to have like 4 sheets to be filled out by a
correct,
user in one sitting. Okay?
correct,
Yeah,
correct.
yeah, yeah,
So it's things like that.
No, you're absolutely right.
yeah,
Go ahead,
yeah.
Jovan.
Yeah, no, 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 very, very, very important advice. David was just imparting there, and we talk about collaboration and building out, and one of the key things is that for us at D6 and also for you there at Serra, that's how we've built our enterprise via collaboration with various partners, various experts around the world, so to speak. David, as we bring our conversation around, so to speak, for Serra particularly moving forward, what's the future looking like? And let's say, for instance, you have someone down in Trinidad, Barbados, who hear about what you're doing today via this broadcast and get in touch and want to do some work with you. What's the future looking like for Sarah?
From a platform perspective or as a
From a platform perspective and other innovations that you want to bring in. I know you mentioned just now there's some
okay,
things that have been on the back burner that you
okay,
want to
yeah,
bring forward. Yeah.
okay, okay. Fun fact.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so other than my the co-founder in who's from Kenya, we've
Yeah.
adopted him, so he's Caribbean now. He's West
Yes.
Indian now.
Yes. Welcome. Welcome.
um,
Has he picked a flag yet? Has he picked, or he's just repping
you have
everybody?
y- y- Well,
has to
he
be
kind of
months.
diplomatic. He kind of diplomatic. He's gonna stay on the fence. Yeah, I
Right.
always tell him he's stay on the fence, so he's gonna represent everybody apparently.
Everybody.
Right. Right. Smart.
Yeah.
Smart guy. Smart guy. Smart guy.
Um, but I think so we have the four founders, but every single person in the back who's actually supported us, they're all from of Caribbean origin.
Okay.
Everyone. My my vision is to actually have a Serra which leverages all the skill set and the knowledge of people across the region. Something built by us for us. That's not to say that we're not going to use outside skills or whatever, but I think there's a greater appreciation if you come in and you say, okay, I've learned something in university, I've learned something on my own, and I can actually contribute to this. So we are always, well, right now we haven't raised or anything yet, but we always keep that in the back of our heads. How can we leverage the experience and the skill here in the Caribbean to build a bigger and better and a product that we can all rely on. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
As Sarah, Sarah too, I want my dream vision is no matter which island you go to, um, you'll be able to use Sarah to pay for goods and services or send people keep on moving back and forth. I'm all about one Caribbean. So
Yeah.
sending money from one person from one country to another. And it's for that reason Sarah was designed. Well, when we started off, we had multi-currency in mind because we knew that
Right.
listen, our vision is to actually not only support Montserrat, but the wider region, which has other currencies.
Right.
Excellent. 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 Great plans, great conversation that we've been having today, David. And we really do appreciate you taking the time and coming and speaking with us today. And at some point in the future, we're going to have you back to talk about, Serra developments and different things that are happening within innovation within the tech space in the Caribbean. So what I'm going to
Mhm.
do, I'm going to let John share his final thoughts or final question before we bring our conversation today to a wrap.
Yeah.
Yeah. As Javon said, really appreciate your time, David. I mean, the insight of collaboration, working with the institutions, having the institutions create the environment for mistakes to be made, experimentation, all of those are critical to developing the future leaders. And we really, really appreciate your time with us today, man.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have
Yeah.
one thing to say. This is just for people out there, those who are thinking about getting into the space. I think the most exciting thing about technology today is that people no longer have to wait for change to come from elsewhere. With the right skills and collaboration, we can build the systems our communities
Ourselves.
need ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
We
It's
don't
important.
need to. Yeah. Yeah. Again, you still do this whole build versus buy, but there's nothing stopping us from doing it ourselves.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
I think you've summarized the entirety of our conversation today perfectly, David. Do it ourselves. We can do it ourselves. And
Yeah.
I think that is a brilliant way to end our conversation today. As Jono said, thank you and thank your team also for affording you to
Yeah.
come on and speaking with us today. Give our
Never.
regards to Manish and the rest of the team there at Serra. You guys are doing an amazing job so far. Your tenacity in sticking with it and ensuring that what you thought of became something that is actually there within the marketplace. It's been adapted both by financial institutions and private sector institutions. And what we wish for Serra definitely is to see a Caribbean-wide Serra that when we travel throughout the Caribbean, we'll be using Serra to make
Yep.
payments as they do throughout other parts of the world. So congratulations on what you guys have come up with and all the best and Godspeed as you seek to move forward to grow Serra into being a Caribbean-wide, Caribbean-grown enterprise. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
All right.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.
Take care. All right, man. Thanks.
All
All
right.
All right.
right.
All right.